Hello, everyone, and you're all very welcome to tonight's information webinar by the NCSE and hosted by As I Am. My name is Michael, and I work on the Policy, Legal and Information Line team at As I Am, and I'm joined tonight by Sarah Ledwidge, who is the National Coordinator with the NCSE, and Sinead Morgan, who is the Team Manager based down in Munster, County Kerry, to be particular. Tonight's webinar will focus on a couple of things, but in particular, it's an information session to provide you as parents with relevant information that you might need in relation to your child as they're starting their school journey. So it's going to touch upon the role of the NCSE, in particular the role of the SENO, and how parents can contact their SENO, and also then very importantly, information on the Parents Notify portal, which Sarah and Sinead will speak to in a little bit more detail. Tonight's session is recorded, and the presentations will be recorded, but the Q&A session will not be recorded. So in the days thereafter, the recording will be available and sent out to those who have registered for the webinar, but also will be available on our YouTube channel as well. So thank you to everyone who has taken the time to be with us tonight, but also has taken the time to submit the questions in advance. If we do have time, we'll open up the Q&A box to live questions, but the questions that have been submitted in advance will be incorporated also within the presentation. But if there are questions that haven't been picked up along that, I'll put those to Sarah and Sinead. So the presentation will take around 50 minutes, and then there'll be an opportunity for the Q&A session as such. But there will hopefully be time for people to get their answers answered by the team. So I'm delighted to hand you over to Sarah and also to Sinead. But I believe, Sarah, you're up first. And
Yep,
thank you.
that's correct. Thanks, Michael. So hi, everybody. You're very welcome this evening, and thanks to Michael and the team and As I Am for having us here this evening. We're delighted to be here and sharing this information with everybody. So what I will do is I'll just work through the first few slides, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Sinead, who will work through the last few slides. And then any of the pre-submitted questions that we've added to the end of our slide deck so that we can work through those. And then, as Michael said, at the end, we'll hopefully have a bit of time to go through any questions that come in while we're working through. So just to get started, and to introduce myself, I'm Sarah Ledwidge. I am the National Coordinator for Region 1 within the NCSE. That's largely the East Coast. You'll see that I do have Leitrim, which does technically touch the West Coast. So it's a small bit confusing in that sense, but for the most part, I'm the eastern half of the country. And the counties that I coordinate for are listed there. My email address is there also. Feel free to take that down and to contact me directly if you need to at any point. My colleague Stephanie Kelly is the national coordinator in the West at the moment. So any of the counties that you don't see there, she coordinates, and her email address takes the same format as mine, so stephanie.kelly@ncse.ie. So you can have, I suppose you can take note of that as well if you're in the western half of the country, because she'll probably be best placed to support you. That said, don't be afraid to contact me, and I'll direct you to the right place anyway. I'm going to give Sinead the mic now just so she can introduce herself.
Thanks, Sarah. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here this evening. My name is Sinead Morgan, and I am the team manager for Kerry. I'm a former primary school teacher and would have worked as an advisor with the NCSE in inclusion, autism, and assessment need. My email is on the screen, sinead.morgan@ncse.ie, if you wish to reach out to me. All right. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Sinead. Okay, so just to outline our goals for this session, we are hoping that we'll be successful in outlining for you the role of the SENO, how a SENO can support you as a parent or guardian, and how a SENO can support schools. Circular 39/2025, which is the approach and key measures to support forward planning for special education provision for the 2026-27 school year. essentially that's the circular that resulted in parents notify for the coming school year. Accessing SET and SNA support within mainstream and collaboration between home and school. So we'll jump in first and foremost with what do SENOs do. So SENOs work for us in the National Council for Special Education. SENOs and everybody within the National Council for Special Education works within Department of Education and Youth Policy. So we operate under and are bound by Department of Education and Youth Policy at all times. So circulars, any policy changes, anything like that, we will implement once we become aware of them. SENOs work in each county to support parents, guardians and schools to meet the special educational needs of students. Our SENOs are involved in planning for specialised placements for students who have complex needs and recommendations for special classes or special schools. And our SENOs work with other professionals to plan for special education provision. So just an example of some of the other professionals that we would work with. We work very, very closely with our colleagues in the Department of Education and Youth, particularly in their planning and building unit in relation to planning for special education. And we also would work closely, I suppose, on a local level with CDNT teams. So we would provide information sessions in collaboration with CDNT teams. We work very, very closely with schools, with teachers, principals, and anybody who is, I suppose, involved in a child's educational life. So often we would be involved with TUSLA and tests through, I suppose, either looking at and addressing reduced school day issues, attending MEHL meetings where there's a multidisciplinary team needed to support a child. So we have a lot of places, I suppose, across a child's educational journey where we can support at all levels, so support parents, guardians, schools, and other professionals as well. So what you're probably most interested in is what the SENOs can do for you as parents and guardians. So we can give you information on schools and school options. We can explain Department of Education policy. We can discuss what parents and guardians need to do to plan for their child's education, including supporting you with understanding how to enroll your child in a school. We deliver parental seminars to provide information, such as the one we're delivering as we speak. And we examine children's professional reports with written consent and let parents and guardians know what options are available for their child. So parents can complete the Parents Notify form and upload reports at that link there. I will share the slides this evening with Michael at the end. We can provide a letter to confirm your child's eligibility for a special class or special school if appropriate. We may attend scheduled meetings with parents and/or schools and other professionals regarding your child. We can explore the option of home tuition and process applications for home tuition for eligible children where that's applicable. What we do for schools then is we provide advice and guidance in relation to special educational needs and resources. We provide presentations to schools on NCSE processes. We provide information on teacher professional learning and in-school teaching supports to schools. We have a very comprehensive teacher professional learning program that runs every year that teachers can access for support as they need. We process applications for additional resources, so where assistive technology or school transport is required, in line again with Department of Education and Youth Policy. We review the care needs in schools and allocate special needs assistant posts to schools accordingly. And we work with schools and boards of management to establish special classes where they are needed and where it is possible to do so. What I haven't got on there is we work very, very closely as well with the patron bodies of schools, and that is I suppose the approach that has commenced already this year in relation to establishing special classes for September 2026. So we'd have regular contact at all levels within a school. So the school directly themselves, with the Board of Management, and then with the school's patron body or management body. Just to highlight some things that a SENO can't do, a SENO can't enroll a child in a school. So we can't, I suppose, do the actual process of enrolling a child in the school. Schools have to follow their admissions notices and policies, and parent or guardian has to apply to the school. So we don't enroll children in school, but we support parents with information on schools, and I suppose that eligibility piece around what types of school your child would be eligible to attend. We don't enroll children in special classes. NCSE don't directly assess any children, and we don't make recommendations ourselves for school placements. So assessments and school placements and recommendations for school placements have to come from multidisciplinary teams, so the likes of CDNT or qualified psychologists. So I suppose our teams, while very experienced and are very much qualified to be working and supporting you in, I suppose, identifying schools and sharing that information with you. They are not psychologists, and therefore they do not and cannot assess children or make recommendations for school placements. We cannot recommend individual schools. So we can provide you with information on the schools within your area, but we cannot recommend one school over another. We can't work outside of Department of Education and Youth policy, as I mentioned, and we can't advocate on behalf of a child or group of children with regard to enrolment in particular school. And that comes down to, again, the legislation around schools admissions, and schools having their own admissions and enrolment policies that they are bound to follow. So we can't advocate outside of, the school having to follow that specific enrolment policy themselves. And then our SENOs don't advise on specific teaching approaches or curriculum. Our advisors will advise teachers and support teachers with teaching approaches and curriculum, but SENOs don't provide that. I had a video in here, but we've done a little bit of testing beforehand and the sound just isn't working this evening. So I'm instead of showing you the video, I'm going to just speak to you a little bit more about Circular 0039/2025, which is the circular that underpins the Parents Notify process. So the circular was issued by the Department of Education earlier in the summer, and essentially the circular outlines that parents need to notify the NCSE that they are seeking a special school or special class placement for their child by the 1st of October. We have established, and I'm actually just going to share the next slide so you have something better than a blank screen to look at. We have established a portal on our website, which is the Parents Notify portal. We can share a link to that with Michael, who can share it on to you afterwards. When you go to that link, you'll be able to watch the video that was on the previous slide, and all the information that you need to know is there. But Parents Notify and the circular was issued in order to support the NCSE and the Department of Education with ensuring that we know if your child requires a special school or special class placement for the coming year, in order to support the planning for that. So I suppose we were often faced with a problem where we didn't know the families. We knew some of the families who were going to be seeking placement, and we created places thinking that we were creating the places for the families that were known to us, and then we would find that schools would have children internally that they needed to enroll into those special class places, or there would be other children who applied who were local and through the school's admissions policy got in who also needed those places, but who we weren't aware of. So Parents Notify and the circulars, I suppose last year's circular and this year's circular 39/2025 were issued in order to improve that situation so that we knew as many of the children who were seeking special school and special class placement as far in advance as possible, to support the planning so that we could make sure that we were going to have the places for those children. One of the things that has changed in this year's circular is that the circular now states that schools must include the eligibility letter as part of the criteria for the class. So the having an eligibility letter for a special class is now part of the criteria for accessing that class. So it means it supports the NCSE and the Department of Education in our planning for places. So it is open and active at the moment. I would say there is a significant number of parents notifications coming through the portal at the moment. And so there is a slight delay between when you as a parent submit your notification and you ultimately get the contact from the SENO with the letter where it's applicable, or the contact from the SENO to say that the report that was submitted doesn't meet criteria. So there is a slight delay in that at the moment, but we have been working with all of our teams here and we're working through that quite considerably faster in the last few days. They've been working to clear any backlog that's there, but just to note that if you haven't submitted yet and you're going to, there may be a short, I suppose, time lag between when you submit it and when you get the contact from your local team. What we are looking for and what you need to have to hand when you are going to submit your parents notification form is you need a professional report that confirms your child's diagnosis and supports has the recommendation to support your child's placement in a special class or special school. You'll need to have your child's PPS number, their date of birth, and your AIR code. So once you have all of that, you can submit that through Parents Notify. And then what happens next is you will receive a confirmation that it's been received straight away. So once you receive that, you know that we have it. Our teams then will check for eligibility for special school or special class placement. And then your SENO will contact you directly to update you on where things are at and to issue with the eligibility letter where it's appropriate. And just, I suppose, one thing we just want to be really clear on so there's no confusion, submitting this form is not the same as applying for a school placement. It confirms your eligibility to apply for a special class or special school placement, but you do still need to apply directly to schools for places. So it's just to be sure that you are thinking of that. It's not an application to a school, it's just to confirm your child's eligibility. You do still need to apply directly to schools. So I'm going to hand you over to Sinead now just in a moment. Before I do, I just wanted to touch on, Sinead's going to talk you through, I suppose, some of the supports in schools and how parents and the NCSE can work in supporting a child once they're in school and what supports are available within schools. One of the things that are available within schools are SNAs, and I suppose there's been a lot going on in the last few days in relation to the SNA guidelines that were published recently on NCSE's website. So I just wanted to chat to you about that briefly for a moment. We are aware that there are concerns from parents and schools in relation to the SNA guidelines. And I suppose it's just to for now, assure you that we are aware of the concerns. The guidelines don't represent any change to the model of allocation for SNAs at the moment. And NCSE are currently working to issue further clarification to the system. So we will issue further clarification to I suppose schools, to all relevant organisations, as I am, are going to receive that clarification as well. I've already spoken to Michael that once we send that clarification to as I am, he can pass it on to attendees here. I've no doubt it'll be shared on as I am's platforms anyway, but we are going to provide further clarification on the NCSE guidelines. So that will be coming in the coming days. And I suppose we also just really want to offer reassurance, I suppose, to yourselves as parents, especially those parents who, I suppose the parents of autistic learners who may either already be in special class settings or are going to be going to special class settings in the coming years, is just to reassure you that the SNA allocation of 2 posts that goes into every autism class is ring fenced, and that is not changed, and that will still be there for your child within the autism class. So I suppose we're going to talk you through getting the support now. Sinead will take over, but just to reassure you that we are aware of the concerns being raised, and we will issue further clarification on those issues over the coming days, and we'll make sure that as I am have them to share with you all then. Okay. So Sinead, I'll hand over to you now. I'll keep flicking through the slides here. So
Thanks, Sarah. That's great.
no
Thanks
problem.
very much. So I suppose in the coming slides, I'm going to address 2 key areas. I'm going to outline accessing SET, so that's special education teaching support, as well as accessing SNA, so special needs assistance support in mainstream schools. And the second part of the presentation then will look at collaboration between home and school and acknowledge how important that fostering that collaboration is. Just to highlight, it's no longer a diagnosis led, it's needs based. So there's no individual applications. And a student support plan is a term you're going to hear a lot of, and you may be familiar with it. A student support plan is a written document that will record targets, and it's very much strengths based. And I'll elaborate on that in the coming slides as well. So we'll discuss this in more detail. Sarah, would you mind changing slide? Thanks. So the set guidelines, there are set guidelines for both primary and post-primary schools, and they're available for you to download on the Department of Education website. And I'm going to go through the key messages so you understand what the guidelines are actually highlighting. So firstly, special education teaching resources are allocated for the sole purpose of providing additional teaching to support to children with additional needs. There are 8 key principles which support the inclusion and well-being of all children with additional needs. And they're also available on the Department of Education website. I'm going to just name them for you and just give you a little overview, but if you want more information, do download the document. So the first key principle is an inclusive education system. So an education system which embraces diversity, and that's about identifying and removing barriers for all children to be able to access, participate, and achieve. The second key principle is establishing an inclusive school culture. An inclusive school culture ensures that to the greatest extent possible, learners can be present, participate in, achieve, and be supported in mainstream schools. The third principle is collaboration, and collaboration is extremely important, and it involves collaboration as a whole school community, and that includes the teachers, the children, and the parents all working together to support children with additional needs. Well-being is a fourth key principle, and well-being is that the well-being of the children is central to education provision, and we're fostering that belonging and connectedness to the school community. The fifth key principle is engagement and participation, and that's ensuring that the views of children are considered in matters that affect them. So it's having a practice and policies in place that allow us to support purposeful participation. So gathering the voice of all learners, including those who are speaking and non-speaking. The sixth principle is having a child-centered and needs-based approach, and that's in line with a framework called Continuum of Support Framework. I'm going to show you that in the coming slides and explain that to you as well. It's very much a problem-solving process where you're identifying, you're meeting, and you're responding to the needs. The seventh key principle is an evidence-informed practice and outcomes. So we're looking at interventions and outcomes that support children and the individual needs of autistic children. So, for example, the use of visuals, which we know, as Temple Grandin would say, are the primary language for autistic children, the use of digital technology. A lot of these evidence-based interventions would have actually been referenced at the Autism European Conference last week. And the NCSE have an advisor service that we provide TPL, teacher professional learning, which is like CPD to teachers, and support them with these evidence-based interventions. And it's about identifying an intervention that works for different children, because what might work for one may work for all, but we have to have that skill set. And the NCSE advisors, they support teacher professional learning around that. The eighth key principle is governance and accountability. And that's acknowledging that schools are accountable in complying with the relevant legislation and departmental circulars in the correct deployment of special education teaching resources. So they're the 8 key principles. If we go back now to the guidelines for primary schools and post-primary schools, another key message is the roles and responsibilities in relation to special education provision are clearly defined and communicated in schools. And what we mean by that is that class teachers are aware of their role, that the special education teacher is aware of their role, and the SNAs, the special needs assistants, are aware of their roles. The continuum of support is the framework which guides the provision of support for children with additional needs. And I'll show you what that looks like now as well in the coming slides. It's very much about a problem-solving process where you're supporting and you're documenting and recording each level of the continuum of support. So you're using assessments, school-based assessments, to support the teaching and learning. So you're identifying the needs, you're meeting the needs with your research-based interventions, and you're monitoring and reviewing. And that's really important. And that would always be in line with school policies. The provision of special education teaching support is collaborative and holistic, and this is documented in the continuum of support, what we call student support plans. So that's the written document, and that's where all that information is recorded. The views and wishes of children are central to planning, and they should also be documented within the student support plans. And the schools would have tools to gather the voice of the child. And actually, on that note, the NCSE today launched a student voice initiative called Create, where we have designed a toolkit to support schools in gathering the voice of children, both speaking and non-speaking. The final key message in the set guidelines is the deployment of special education teaching supports is recorded and monitored by the school and overseen by the board and school management. And that's really, really important. I suppose what I would like to also acknowledge is that collaboration with parents is a critical factor in enhancing outcomes for children with additional needs. This is recognised by schools and is evident in many good practices and initiatives. Parental engagement is enhanced when parents are consulted with, and we know that national and international research supports that as well. Next slide, please, Sarah. Thanks. So the SET, the Special Education Teacher Support Reference Guide for Parents, that's available on the Department of Education website. And what it does is it answers the 6 questions there on the slide. So first of all, how is additional support from a special education teacher determined? And it's very much around that collaborative piece, collaboration between the teachers, between you and your child. And sometimes other professionals may be involved. It's acknowledging that needs may change over time as the child grows and develops, and that's documented within your student support plan. Extra support may be needed at different levels, again in accordance with the continuum of support, which I'll talk about again later. So we have, just I suppose to highlight now, we've 3 stages. We've classroom support, and school support plus. And the continuum of support acknowledges which level of support your child is in receipt of. And it's a framework, and all schools are using that to help them identify, meet, and monitor the needs within their school. The second question there is, what is a student support file? So a student support file is used to record the information in relation to your child's strengths. So it'll acknowledge your child's strengths, it'll acknowledge their interests and their needs. It's also used to record progress, to monitor that and review, and it'll identify any changes that may occur throughout their period of schooling. The third question, what is a student support plan? A student support plan is a specific plan. So you could look at it like your student support file contains all your student support plans. And they are developed in consultation with the relevant class teacher, special education teacher, the parents, and the principal. And they're reviewed regularly. The next question, does my child need a diagnosis to access special education teaching support in a mainstream? And the answer is no, they do not need a diagnosis. It's needs-based, based on assessments that teachers would use to support teaching and learning. Now, what I would like to acknowledge is it's very helpful if you have any additional information at home or reports that you could share with the school. That is very helpful. The next question, what if I am not happy with the support being provided for my child? If you're not happy or if you have any concerns, you should first discuss your concerns with the class teacher, the special education teacher, and you could also talk to the school principal. The final question, does each school get a special education teaching allocation? And the answer is yes, they do. And the resources are allocated to schools based on the educational needs profile of each individual school. And if you're looking for additional information, again, you can download this document on the Department of Education website. All right, thanks, Sarah. So parental engagement. Parental engagement is a critical factor in enhancing outcomes for pupils with special educational needs. And the NCSE on the website have a section or tab whereby you can download resources around general support for learning. We have resources around speech, language and communication. We've additional resources around occupational therapy and promoting learning and behaviour at home. Very much acknowledging that the parents are the primary educators. And in a school environment, we want to support and establish positive relationships so that schools can develop a relational pedagogy. And a pedagogy is how we teach. And to enable that and facilitate that, we need to incorporate the voice of the parents. So it's really important that that collaboration is happening. And for your own information, there's a quick reference guide for parents and guardians. That's on the right-hand side there of the screen, which is available to download from the Department of Education website also. All right, thanks, Sarah. So collaboration, as I have acknowledged, is very, very important and very much about student-centred. So it's student is centre of everything we do. And even with the student support plan, and it's gathering their voice. The parental voice is also gathered and documented within the student support plan, as is the voice of the SNA, therapists where appropriate, teachers, whether that's special education teacher or class teacher, and the principal. And you may be invited to school meetings or support plan meetings. And that's in line with the school policy where you'll discuss the student support plan, which we referenced earlier, the written document where your targets will be identified to support the learning and academic as well as the non-academic or care needs specific to your child. Thanks, Sarah. So this is the continuum of support that I referenced earlier. So on the left-hand side, we have the continuum support for special education teachers. That's the orange, the red and the green. And on the right-hand side, we have around the continuum of support for SNA access. So I'm going to start by addressing the continuum of support for special education teacher. So you'll see there at the bottom of the pyramid, we have the orange, and that's whole school and classroom support for all. And what we mean by that is the general needs of most students are supported by their teachers and by the overall school system. And schools will maybe using various research-based interventions or frameworks. So for example, the Universal Design for Learning is one. And that's just about encouraging multiple means of engagement, representation, action, and expression. So offering choice to students, whether it's digital tools, whether it's drawing, writing, and that's very much done at a classroom level. So what works for one may work for all. If a student requires additional support, they come in at school support for some, and they'd have a school support plan. So likewise, you'd have a classroom support plan. If you're at school support for some, these students or some students with learning, social, emotional and or behavioural needs will require extra support from their teachers. And you may have the involvement of a special education teacher there as well, and their targets will support that. School support plus for a few. This is whereby a few students with significant needs will need the greatest amount of support, usually from a special education teacher. And just to highlight, the needs can be academic or non-academic. It's very much a flexible problem-solving model. So Your child may move from classroom support, and if they require additional support, to school support, and if they require even additional support, school support plus. As time progresses, the needs may change and very much based on assessment for teaching and learning. You might see that your child may move from school support plus and may not require as much support and come down to school support, and they may come back to classroom support. But it's very much a flexible model based again on assessment for teaching and learning. And the NCSE again provide advisory support to help teachers look at research-based interventions to support teaching and learning and attainment of those targets. Now, looking at the right-hand side, we have the SNA axis, and there's 3 levels: level 1, level 2, and level 3. So I'm going to take you through each level. Level 1, that's where the students' care needs are addressed. So the care needs of most students are supported by their teachers and by the overall school system. So very much similar to the orange part of the continuum of support for special education teaching. It's done within the classroom. Level 2, if they require additional support around care needs, that's for some students with additional care needs where they require extra support. And level 3, then, they're the students with the greatest additional care needs. And that's a few students with the greatest level of additional care needs will need greater access to SNA support. And that's what we'd consider a significant primary care need. Now, Circular 0030/2014 acknowledges care needs. Section 4 and Section 5 acknowledges the role of the teacher and the role of the SNA, the special needs assistants. Again, referencing and just reiterating that the role of the SNA is care needs. It's not a teaching role. Now, the NCSE published the SNA toolkit to support schools with the allocation, because it's very much a school-based model where they're given an allocation and they deploy the resources to children with the highest level of need. And the SNA toolkit, which is available to download on the NCSE website, clearly acknowledges what significant primary care need includes and what significant primary care need does not include. So, for example, if we were to look at feeding, a significant primary care need includes feeding a student who cannot physically feed themselves, or peg or tube fed, or supervision of a student who has a feeding, eating, drinking, swallowing care plan owing to a risk of choking aspiration. And again, I suppose they're highlighted for you, and that document is available on the NCSE website for you to download and to read and familiarise yourself with. Okay, thank you, Sarah. The next slide looks at underlying principles of SNA deployment. And I just want to reiterate, there's no diagnosis of disability required when we talk about SNA deployment. There's no specific student applications, so it's up to the school. They have the autonomy and the flexibility to deploy the resources to the children with the highest level of need. So if a student is at level 3, they would be a student considered at the highest level of need. Just to highlight, it's going to look different in every school because each and every school is different. Very like our pupils, each and every pupil is different. The greatest level of need should be in receipt of the greatest level of support. The NCSE review SNA allocation over a 2-year period, and that is currently in progress. And just to highlight, inclusion is really, really important. And when we talk about inclusion, we know that there's no one definition for inclusion, that there's many definitions for inclusion. We know that what inclusion looks like in one school is very different to what inclusion looks like in another school and the principles being deployed. But what we do know is that we want to identify barriers and remove those barriers to support the inclusion of each and every learner within the school environment. Okay, thanks, Sarah. So looking at what are the implications for the student, and as I mentioned, it's very much student-centered approach. The student is center of everything that we do. My opinion is important. It's very important that the children are aware that their voice is listened to and heard, and that they have the opportunity to be listened to and to express themselves. And it's important that schools have the tools and the support around that. And that's where Advisory Support Service supports schools with that. My school will seek to understand my need, and that's ensuring that the school are aware of and avail of teacher professional advisory support opportunities. that my school will match my need to the right intervention. So each and every child is different. Some interventions may work, a particular intervention may work for a particular child. However, we may have to trial and error different interventions. So, for example, a visual may work for one particular child, but it may be an object that's required for another child. So it's adapting the intervention to suit the individual needs of each and every child. I have helped to set my targets. It's really important that the children are included in the design of targets, that they're aware of the targets, and they get to celebrate the success and achievement of the targets. Because it's really important when schools are designing targets that they're linked to assessment and evidence based. So it's about having what we call a SMART target, a specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timed. I want these students to experience success. It's very important that children are aware that I will receive support according to my need. And it's very much about a strengths-based approach. So if your child likes Paw Patrol, that we're bringing in that interest into their learning and to help them access the curriculum. My school know what I can do for myself. And then that's about supporting schools with listening to the voice of the child. And we have many, many toolkits out there. For example, My Thoughts About School, where we actually encourage and get that voice of the student into our planning. I won't have SNA support forever, only until I can support myself. And that's very much aligning with the aims of the curriculum, fostering independence. And again, each and every child is different, and that is important to highlight here. But we're always looking at what the research would say is the bridging model, stepping back and fostering that independence when the child is ready, moving away from the Velcro model where we're with them all the time. My targets are designed so I become as independent as possible as early as possible. And again, that's really important that we're fostering and promoting independence. Again, a key outcome of the curriculum. Thank you, Sarah. So now I'm going to pass you back over to Sarah, who's going to go through a few questions and answers.
Yeah, thanks, Sinead. So we are just at the point now where we have some of the questions that were submitted in advance.